In a corner of the planet where the mountain range seems to hold up the sky on its shoulders, there is a land that cannot be summarized on maps. It is not just a country, nor a landscape, nor a sum of ecosystems. It is an ancient dialogue between rock, water, and life. A territory where the mountains converse with the jungle and where the desert learns to listen to the murmur of the sea, Peru. A living mosaic that stretches from eternal snows to rivers of green steam, from wind-battered plateaus to forests that throb like a wet heart. Here, nature doesn't just exist, it asserts itself. The peaks take your breath away. The valleys hold stories that no one has finished telling. In every ravine, in every cloud hovering over a summit, you can sense a force that predates humankind. This is not a passive scenario, it is a workshop of evolution. The Andes Mountains run through the country like a stone spine. They are more than just mountains. They are climatic walls, water sources, guardians of time. From their glaciers, spring rivers that flow towards the Amazon, and from their slopes descend winds that shape life. What happens here doesn't stay here. It resonates throughout the entire continent. At these altitudes, survival demands character. Oxygen becomes scarce. The cold bites at the skin, and the sun burns with an almost metallic intensity. Only those who learn to negotiate with the extreme thrive. That's why Andean wildlife isn't fragile, it's stubborn. Among rocks that resemble the teeth of giants, a predator advances without leaving a trace. The puma, silent lord of the Andes, moves like a thought that no one can grasp. Its paws cushion the world, and its gaze calculates invisible distances. It doesn't need to roar to govern, it's enough for it to exist. His realm has no clear borders. He can hunt on icy plateaus or descend into temperate forests. He adjusts his strategy like a chess master. Sometimes he ambushes vicuñas, other times he stalks rodents, other times he follows the trail of a deer. The puma doesn't dominate because of its size, it dominates because of its intelligence. While he roams the earth, another sovereign reigns in the sky. The Andean condor spreads its wings as if to embrace the entire mountain range. It doesn't fly, it is carried by invisible rivers of warm air. For ancient cultures, it was a messenger. For science, a pillar of the ecosystem. Its task is not to hunt, but to cleanse. Where death leaves its mark, the condor transforms it into balance. It consumes what others cannot and prevents diseases from spreading. He is a guardian who works without applause, a doctor of the landscape. However, even giants are vulnerable. Poison, habitat loss, and ignorance have all touched their wings. But there are also hands that protect them, communities that understand that without the condor, the sky is incomplete. Taking care of it is taking care of the memory of the air. Further down, where humans learn to live with the altitude, walks an animal that changed the history of the Andes, the llama. It is neither wild nor completely domesticated. It is a companion. For millennia, it carried stones, harvests, dreams. It opened paths where metal could not go. Its gait is serene, almost philosophical. It withstands winds that cut the face and slopes that seem impossible. Its wool once sheltered empires and still shelters those who endure in the mountains. The llama didn't conquer the Andes, it learned to listen to them. Beside it, smaller and more delicate, appears the alpaca. Its fiber is a caress against the cold, a textile miracle born of necessity. Two breeds, two styles, one same pact with the mountain. Hakaya and Suri, names that sound like ancient wind. Alpacas provide more than just warmth. They sustain economies, traditions, and identities. Each shearing is a ritual that connects past and present, human hands and animal bodies in a single heartbeat. In its gentle silence, there is a lesson. Coexistence is also technology. But if there is a truly free spirit in the highlands, it is the vicuña. Wild, light, almost ethereal, it runs as if floating across the plateau. Its wool, the finest in the world, was the object of greed and nearly led to its extinction. Today, it is a symbol of return, a symbol that protection can also triumph. The vicuña never accepted domestication. It lives in small families, watched over by an attentive male who reads the horizon like an open book. Its body is a machine of efficiency, capable of extracting life where there is hardly any water. It is proof that beauty can be resilient. And while the Andes tell their story of rock and wind, another universe opens up to the east, the Peruvian Amazon. An ocean of green where the light falls in drops and the air tastes of rain. Here the rules change, the world becomes vertical. In the highest treetops moves a tireless acrobat, the spider monkey. Its arms are bridges, its tail a fifth hand. It never trusts the ground. It knows that below the jungle becomes dangerous. He lives suspended between sky and leaves. Its role is silent but crucial. By eating fruit, it sows future forests. Each seed it drops is a promise of a new tree. Without him, the jungle would forget how to be reborn. Closer to the water, a tranquil figure appears, the capybara. It seems made of calm, but its life is one of constant vigilance. In large groups, they protect themselves from jaguars and caimans. The capybara is not naive, it is collective. It spends hours submerged, with eyes and nostrils barely visible like a mud sentinel. It feeds on grasses and, unknowingly, shapes the riverbanks, maintains pathways and balances the vegetation. Even peace has an ecological function. But no name carries as much weight in the Amazon as that of the jaguar. Spotted gold that glides through shadows, owner of the most powerful bite on the continent. It doesn't pursue, it appears. It doesn't threaten, it decides. Nothing escapes its adaptability. It hunts on land and in water day and night. It can crack shells, bring down capybaras, and confront caimans. The jaguar is the measure of American power. Protecting him is protecting everything he touches. Above its winged realm shines the blue and yellow macaw, a flash of color that pierces the canopy with metallic cries. It is not just a bird, it is a sower of the sky. Its beak opens hard seeds, its flight opens new forests. It lives in pairs, faithful like few other creatures. It builds nests in the hollows of giant plants and communicates in a language that travels for miles. Where there are macaws, the jungle is still alive. All these beings so different make up the same fabric. The Andes and the Amazon are not separate worlds. They are chapters of a single story. The water that originates in glaciers ends up nourishing tropical roots. The wind that brushes across the high Andes ends up swaying palm trees. But this balance is not eternal. Deforestation opens wounds, mining poisons rivers, and oblivion shatters traditions. Each loss is a word erased from the great Peruvian book, and a book without pages becomes silence. Even so, there are signs of hope. Communities protecting vicuñas, reserves caring for condors, rangers defending the jaguar. The future is not yet written. There is still a choice. Peru is more than a destination. It's a shared responsibility. From the motionless flight of the condor to the leap of the spider monkey, from the patience of the capybara to the silent roar of the jaguar, everything reminds us that greatness does not belong to human beings. It belongs to life. Our journey ends for now. The mountains will continue to rise at dawn, the rivers will continue to seek the sea, the jungle will continue to breathe in the green darkness. History does not stop. If this journey made you feel the pulse of Peru, join us in protecting it. Subscribe, share, and keep the conversation alive about these lands that still hold miracles. Because taking care of Peru isn't just a tourist attraction, it's an act of gratitude towards the planet and respect for our own origins. In Peru, altitude is not just a number, it's the law. As you climb the Andes, the air thins, as if the world were snipping away the oxygen with invisible scissors. The sun, instead of warming, beats down with cruel intensity, and the cold doesn't arrive like a breeze, it arrives like a warning. Everything in this territory seems to remind you that up here life isn't given, it's earned. The Andes are not a uniform mountain range. They are a system of cliffs, plateaus, canyons, and hidden passes. There are slopes that seem suspended in mid-air, valleys that harbor microclimates, and ravines that channel winds like razor blades. And in each of these landscapes, evolution has written different solutions. The creatures that live here are not mountain animals. They are specialists in surviving the impossible. In the Andean dawn, the landscape awakens slowly. The ice still glistens in the shadows, the rocks retain the night's chill, And the silence is so absolute that sounds seem distant even when they are near. In that silence, a presence moves unhurriedly, yet purposefully. The vicuña, light, vigilant, almost delicate, and at the same time made of a toughness few can imagine. Her body is a perfect response to the high plateau. Her long legs aren't just for running, they're for floating over the uneven terrain, for moving efficiently, where every miscalculated step could mean a fall, an injury, a death sentence. The vicuña doesn't rely on abundance. At these altitudes, food is scarce. The grass is rough, coarse, and tough. Most of the plants are small, hardy, designed to withstand cold and wind. And yet the vicuña has learned to draw life from this austerity. Their metabolism is a fuel-saving machine. Their breathing is a fine engineering feat. His lungs and blood are optimized to capture the little oxygen available. And when he runs, he does so with an elegance that seems like a promise. The promise that in the Andes, beauty can also be endurance. Family groups are organized according to an ancient logic. A male keeps watch, patrolling with his gaze. Several females and their young feed within a territory marked not by fences but by memory. Intruders are detected quickly. Challenges exist, but up here conflict comes at too high a price, and when the cost is high, selection favors control. However, in the same landscape where the vicuña moves like the wind, there is a predator that does not need constant speed but the perfect moment. The puma. It's not a showcat, it's a shadow that adapts. The Andean puma knows that hunting at high altitude is different. A long chase is an unnecessary expense. Here, every movement costs oxygen. That's why its hunt is a lesson in economy. Observation, waiting, calculation, and a final burst that lasts only a few seconds. In open terrain, ambush is difficult. There aren't as many tree trunks, not as much tall vegetation. The puma must use the rock as an ally. It hugs the shadows, silhouettes itself against the terrain, becoming just another line in the landscape. It advances with its body low, almost as if asking permission of the ground. His power is not announced. You can feel it when it's already too late. But the puma is not an invincible machine. Life in the Andes also tests it. If it fails, there is no easy food. If it is injured, the mountain does not forgive. That is why even the apex predator lives with a narrow margin. And that margin turns every hunt into a gamble. In Peru, survival is both a statistic and a destiny. As the sun rises, the landscape fills with human activity. And here an ancient, deeply Peruvian relationship emerges. The alliance between Andean communities and their camelids, the flame. Watching a llama walk along a high-altitude trail is like watching history in motion. Its hooves don't strike hard, they rest gently. Its body is made for the cold, for dryness, for distance. And its gaze, seemingly calm, is the gaze of an animal that understands the terrain. For centuries, llamas carried salt, textiles, food, and minerals. They were the silent engine of routes that connected worlds. In a territory where the wheel wasn't always practical, where the terrain disrupts the logic of roads, the llama was the perfect technology, resilient, social, and efficient. It wasn't just carrying cargo, it was carrying survival. And where there are llamas, there are usually alpacas. If the llama was muscle and a path, the alpaca was shelter and continuity. Its fiber, soft and warm, is a triumph of adaptation, because the alpaca lives where the wind cuts at the face and the night seems endless. Their flocks advance like living clouds across the high plateau. They graze patiently. And in their social behavior, though it may seem simple, there are hierarchies, signals, subtle tensions that maintain order. An organized group survives better than a chaotic one. In the Andes, even calm has structure. But the true silent protagonist of the high plateau isn't always an animal. Sometimes it's the weather. The sudden cold, the solar radiation that burns without warming, the hail that appears in a matter of minutes, the snow that blocks paths and changes routes, the droughts that harden the soil and make grass a rarity. The mountain is an emotionless judge. It does not negotiate. In this context, even a bird becomes a symbol, the condor. From below, it looks like a suspended dot. Up close, it's a living monument. Its enormous wings aren't for speed, but for soaring far without expending energy. The condor is a master of the currents. It reads the air like a navigator reads the sea. Its ecological role is surgical, cleaning, consuming carrion, eliminating sources of disease. But its cultural role goes far beyond that. In the Andean imagination, the condor is a bridge, a messenger, a spirit of the sky. Its presence not only regulates the ecosystem, but also a people's sense of belonging to their landscape. Protecting the condor is not just about conserving a species, it's about preserving a relationship with the world. And yet, altitude does not define all of Peru, because the country is not a single vertical story. It is a story of contrasts, and to understand that complexity, one must follow the path of the water. The Andes don't just raise rock, they raise rivers. From the glaciers and high-altitude rains spring forth streams that carve their way eastward. At first, they are cold trickles that flow down among the rocks. Then they become impatient rivers that carve valleys. Further downstream, they widen, darken, and become warm. And finally, they enter another realm, the Amazon rainforest. It's as if the water changed language. But before reaching the jungle, Peru shows us another face, one that many forget because its beauty is different. The coast. A territory where the desert meets the ocean and where life clings to the edges. Here, the landscape seems empty at first glance. However, that emptiness is a mask, because even the coastal desert has its own biological logic. Cold ocean currents enrich the ocean and nourish a vast food chain. Birds, fish, marine mammals, everything revolves around this invisible flow. And when the sea is bountiful, so is the coastline. Coastal Peru is a reminder. Abundance can exist in austerity. On the cliffs, on the beaches, in the wetlands, life adapts to the salty wind, the harsh sun, and the lack of fresh water. Some creatures depend on the sea, others depend on the rivers that flow down from the Andes like veins through the desert. Where water touches sand, the world flourishes, and that idea, water as a border between worlds, connects our entire Peruvian odyssey. Because Peru is exactly that, a land where life lives on the edge, between cold and heat, between rock and leaf, between the silence of the highlands and the cry of the jungle. Now let's look east again. The rivers that originate in the mountains descend like serpents of energy. With every kilometer they flow down, the air changes. Green appears first as patches, then as walls, then as an ocean. The humidity increases. The light becomes filtered. The ground is no longer dry stone, but living clay. We are entering the Amazon. And in the Amazon, survival becomes vertical. What in the Andes was horizon and wind, here is shadow and height. Dangers no longer come only from afar. They come from everywhere. The ground may hide predators, but so may the canopy. Branches are pathways and borders. Here, moving around on the ground can be a dangerous decision. That's why many creatures live up there. At this moment of transition, the spider monkey becomes a key figure. Not as an isolated character, but as a symbol of the jungle, an animal that makes vertical space its home. But we won't fully enter that world yet, not yet. First, we must understand the central idea that unites this entire story. Peru is not a country of separate ecosystems. It is a biological corridor, a connection between high altitude and humidity, between aridity and lushness, and in that corridor each species fulfills a function. Vicuñas maintain the balance of the tall grasslands. Pumas regulate populations and prevent the ecosystem from becoming overloaded. Condors clean the land and prevent disease. Llamas and alpacas sustain cultures and economies, while also being part of the living landscape. Nothing exists in isolation, however, this balance is not guaranteed. Glaciers are retreating, rainfall patterns are changing, roads are being built in new directions. Wildfires are reaching areas they previously didn't touch, and when the climate becomes more unstable, the mountains respond harshly. The question is not whether Peru will change. The question is who will be able to adapt faster. And in that question lies the true drama of this documentary. Because the Andes are not just a place to admire, they are a water source that feeds the coast and the rainforest. They are a barrier that defines climates. They are a memory of the planet. When the Andes change, everything changes. The change doesn't happen all at once. You first feel it in the air. As the rivers flowing down from the Andes begin to widen, the wind becomes more humid. The scent of the earth intensifies. The leaves multiply until they cover the horizon, and the light ceases to fall in straight lines, transforming into a golden dust that floats among the branches. We have entered the Peruvian Amazon. Here the world is no longer horizontal, it's vertical. Life isn't organized on soil, but on invisible levels. Roots, trunks, vines, canopies, and a canopy that seems to touch the clouds. Each level is a distinct country with its own rules, its own dangers, and its own inhabitants. The ground is just the first chapter. The real story happens above. Among these heights moves one of the jungle's secret architects, the spider monkey. Its long arms seem made of living rubber. Its prehensile tail functions as an extra hand, capable of supporting its entire body weight as the animal explores the void. For him, the abyss is not a threat, it is a path. The spider monkey rarely descends to the ground. It doesn't need to. In the treetops, it finds food, shelter, and pathways that connect trees like suspended cities. It moves with an almost mathematical elegance, calculating distances that would be impossible for us. Each leap is a precise gamble, each branch a temporary bridge. Their diet is based on fruit, and hidden within this simple preference is a gigantic roll. As they eat and move, they disperse seeds miles from their origin. The future rainforest depends on these unwitting gardeners who plant without knowing they are planting. Without spider monkeys, many trees would have no tomorrow. The social life of these primates is complex. They live in large groups that split up and reunite depending on food availability. They recognize each other by voices, gestures, and glances that we are only beginning to understand. They are not isolated individuals. They are a breathing network. But the Amazon is not a safe haven. The canopy it protects also conceals. Beneath the branches move snakes, birds of prey, and silent felines. A miscalculation can mean a fall, and a fall here is not just a bump. It means entering the territory of other hunters. The land is a different country, a country with harsher laws. Near the rivers, another protagonist appears, the capybara. Seen from afar, it seems a calm, almost carefree animal. But its calmness is strategic. It lives always alert, always connected to the group. The capybara knows that individual peace is fragile. True security is collective. He spends hours submerged with only his eyes and nose showing above the water. The river is his refuge and his border. There he can escape jaguars, anacondas, any threat that dominates the riverbank. His heavy body becomes agile in the water. What is slowness on land is an advantage in the river. It feeds on grasses and aquatic plants, and in doing so, it keeps the edges of the ecosystem clean. Like vicuñas in the highlands, the capybara unknowingly shapes its environment. Where it grazes, other species find space. Even the most peaceful creature has ecological power. Around them, the air fills with flashes of blue and yellow. Macaws streak across the sky like living flags. Their metallic cries are a sonic signature announcing presence, territory, and connection. They fly in pairs, almost always, pairs that last a lifetime. The macaw is not just an ornament of the rainforest. With its beak, it cracks extremely hard seeds that few animals can open. By feeding, it creates opportunities for other species, and by flying, it disperses what the forest needs to regenerate. Its beauty has a function. Its color has a purpose. In the hollows of giant trees, they build nests that resemble fortresses. There, they raise their chicks with almost human devotion. The canopy becomes a neighborhood of voices where each pair recognizes the other by the timbre of its call. The jungle is also a network of families. But no sound is as respected as the silence that precedes the jaguar. He doesn't need to introduce himself. The forest quietly announces him. The jaguar is the pinnacle of this living architecture. Its muscular body seems made for moving among roots and water simultaneously. Unlike other felines, it is not afraid of getting wet. It hunts in rivers, swamps, and hidden trails. Where others hesitate, he moves forward. Its bite is legendary. It doesn't go for necks. It breaks skulls, shells, and armor. It can bring down capybaras, confront caimans, and surprise tapirs. In its presence, the entire jungle recalculates its movements. The jaguar doesn't hunt ecosystems. It organizes them. For many Amazonian cultures, it is more than an animal. It is a spirit, a guardian, a symbol of ancient power. Its image appears on ceramics, in myths, in stories that explain the origin of the rivers. Losing the jaguar would be like losing an entire language. However, its kingdom is shrinking. Deforestation carves straight scars where green labyrinths once stood. The roads bring hunters, livestock, and conflicts the jaguar has never known. The problem isn't the jungle, it's the speed of change. The spider monkey suffers too. When the trees fall, its vertical world collapses. Forced to descend to the ground, it becomes vulnerable to dogs, traps, and bullets. Its reproduction rate is slow. Each loss weighs like a century. The rainforest does not regenerate at the pace of chainsaws. Macaws face another temptation, the illegal market. Their intelligence and vibrant colors make them living trophies. Each captured bird is a hole in the forest's memory. A sky without macaws is a sick sky. And yet the Amazon endures. In protected areas, jaguars are leaving their tracks again. Capybaras continue to mark the edges of the forest. Spider monkeys are creating new trails on young trees. The jungle doesn't give up easily. Their patience is older than our cities. But the Peruvian Amazon is not a world isolated from the rest of the country. It depends on the water that flows down from the Andes, on the clouds that originate in the Pacific, on decisions made thousands of kilometers away. Peru is a single organism with many faces. Every time a glacier retreats, the rivers change their course. Every time a forest is cut down, the local climate is altered. What happens at high altitude affects the plains, and what happens in the rainforest returns to the mountains as rain. Everything is connected by invisible threads. In this third part, we have crossed the threshold into the green heart of the country. We have seen how life is organized in overlapping layers, how each species plays a role, and how the balance depends on fragile details. But there is still something essential to understand: the relationship between these worlds and human beings. Peru is not just a map of mountains and rivers. It is a territory where nature and human memory have learned to coexist for thousands of years. Before there were roads, borders, and concrete cities, there were already invisible paths traced by vicuñas, pumas, herds of llamas, and peoples who understood that the land was not property, but a relative. Here, culture was born from the climate. Identity was born from the landscape. In the Andes, each community is a mirror of its surroundings. Houses face the valleys to observe the movement of the clouds. Crops are planted according to altitude and temperature. And animals are not simply resources. They are integral to an economy that has been circular for centuries. The llama carried what humans could not. The alpaca sheltered what the wind wanted to take away. High Andean herding is not improvisation. It is a slow science built on observation. The herders know how to recognize the health of the pasture by its color, the arrival of a frost by the smell in the air, and the proximity of a storm by the restless flight of the birds. That knowledge isn't written down, it's experienced through experience. For generations, herds of llamas and alpacas shaped the landscape as much as the rivers. Their hooves opened paths, their dung fertilized poor soils, and their presence maintained the balance of the wetlands. The relationship was so close that separating nature and culture was impossible. The animal was not in service, it was part of the system. But the 20th century brought another language. Industrial mining penetrated mountains that were once sacred. Straight roads cut across vicuña trails. Cities grew where water was scarce. Progress arrived quickly and often unannounced, and the landscape began to respond. The glaciers retreated like weary old men. The springs became unpredictable. Some communities had to climb higher to find pasture, while pumas approached corrals in search of easy prey. When the balance is broken, nobody wins completely. Faced with this tension, new forms of coexistence emerged. In several high Andean regions, an ancestral practice was revived: the communal shearing of vicuñas. The animals are carefully surrounded, the fiber is extracted without harming them, and then they are released back into the wild. Conservation is no longer about prohibition, it has become a shared opportunity. That model demonstrated something profound. Protecting wildlife can mean human well-being. Vicuña wool, one of the most valuable in the world, began to fund schools, health clinics, and local projects. The animal ceased to be a victim of poaching and became an economic ally. Respect found a new language. The condor also entered this story. For years it was persecuted out of fear or ignorance. Some saw it as a threat to livestock, others as a mere trophy. But educational programs revealed its true role. Without condors, the mountains become breeding grounds for disease. Caring for the scavenger is caring for the shepherd. Children in Andean communities began to draw the condor not as a monster, but as a guardian of the sky. The elders recalled legends where the bird was a bridge between worlds. Little by little, the perception changed. Culture can heal what prejudice breaks. Meanwhile, to the east, the Amazon was experiencing its own encounter with humankind. Indigenous peoples have inhabited a forest that seems indecipherable to others for millennia. They know that every tree has a name and every river has its own mood. For them, the jaguar is not an enemy. It is a powerful neighbor from whom permission is sought. In the jungle, the boundary between nature and society is more porous. Farms open up among giant trees, rivers serve as both roads and pantries, and myths explain what science is only just beginning to understand. The Amazon is not empty, it is full of living stories. But external pressure changed the rules. Illegal logging opened straight wounds in a territory that had always been curved. Gold mining poisoned rivers with mercury. Roads brought markets closer, but also conflicts. The jaguar, unwittingly, began to encounter cows instead of capybaras. And when a feline kills livestock, human patience breaks down. However, even in that scenario, bridges emerged. Some communities adopted nighttime enclosures to protect animals and prevent reprisals against jaguars. Others promoted responsible wildlife tourism, where seeing a free-roaming macaw is worth more than selling it in a cage. The economy began to learn from the forest. The spider monkey became an unexpected ambassador. Scientists demonstrated that without it, canopy regeneration weakens. Communities understood that protecting primates is protecting the future fertility of their own crops. Science translated into everyday language. The capybara, with its almost philosophical calm, also revealed secrets. In well-preserved wetlands, its presence reduces fires, controls vegetation, and attracts birds that disperse seeds. A giant rodent ended up being an ecological engineer. Nature works better than any urban plan. The Peruvian coast added another chapter. Although many imagine it as a desert, it is a vital corridor where the cold ocean feeds one of the greatest marine productivities on the planet. Artisanal fishermen have learned to read currents like shepherds read clouds. Peru does not have a single face. It has three intertwined souls. When the Amazon rains change, the highlands feel it. When the glaciers shrink, the coast thirsts. When the sea warms, the valleys become impoverished. The entire country is a system of communicating vessels. That's why conservation stopped being just a green issue. It became a matter of water security, cultural identity, and the real economy. Mayors talk about watersheds, young people about biodiversity, and grandparents about memory. The language of the territory diversified. Even so, tensions persist. Some see the rainforest only as timber, the mountains only as minerals, the river only as energy. And others understand that every resource extracted has an invisible price. The debate is not between past and future. It is between short-termism and continuity. Amid this debate, the puma continues roaming the ravines, oblivious to the rhetoric. The condor continues cleaning up what others leave behind. The jaguar marks with its tracks a map that no engineer ever drew. The animals don't have opinions, but they respond. The recent fires in the Amazon have shown the fragility of the ecosystem. As the fire advances, the spider monkey loses its aerial highway, macaws are left without nests, and the capybara flees to increasingly narrow riverbanks. Smoke doesn't distinguish between ideologies. However, community brigades, volunteer park rangers, and scientists working alongside local elders also emerged. The tragedy revealed a network of people willing to defend what they love. Hope is often born in crisis. Peru in the 21st century is at a crossroads. You can repeat the history of other places where natural wealth was depleted in a few decades, or you can invent your own path where development and landscape can engage in dialogue. It's not a technical dilemma, it's an ethical dilemma. The newer generations seem to understand it. At universities in Cusco and Pucallpa, young people are studying jaguars using camera traps. In Ayacucho, wetlands are being restored for vicuñas. On the coast, wetlands are being protected for migratory birds. The future is beginning to take root. This Part 4 doesn't just talk about problems. It speaks of possible encounters between humans and territory. Of the idea that Peru is not a resource, but a complex house where each room depends on the other. Mountain, jungle, and sea look each other in the eye. We have seen how communities can be guardians, how science can listen, how the economy can learn to slow down. But one last look is needed, looking ahead. In Peru, the climate is not a backdrop. It is a protagonist that speaks with its own accent. From ancient times, the Andean peoples learned that the sky does not obey human calendars. The rains come when they want, the frosts choose their nights, and the rivers, which seem calm in winter, can turn into fury in a matter of hours. Here, time isn't measured with clocks, it's measured with clouds. Climate change has entered this conversation like an unwelcome guest. Glaciers, which for centuries were silent reservoirs of water, are retreating at a rate that astonishes even the most cautious scientists. Every meter of ice lost is a file deleted. Every new gap is a question without an answer. In the Cordillera Blanca, the elders point to peaks that once shone year-round. Today they appear bare for months at a time. Where there was once an eternal blanket of snow, now only dark rocks remain, scars of accelerated melting. The condor continues to fly, but the scenery beneath its wings has changed. The shepherds notice subtle changes. The alpacas seek shade where it wasn't needed before. The vicuñas descend to unusual altitudes. The bofidales, those high-altitude oases that sustain life, dry up earlier. The water became an elusive animal. In the Amazon, the climate is also writing a new chapter. The seasons are no longer so predictable. River floods arrive late or with excessive force. Some years the rainforest seems to hold its breath. Other years it overflows like an uncontrolled giant. The jaguar learns a different script. The capybara rehearses alternative routes. Scientists talk about extreme events. Communities talk about strange sky behavior. They both describe the same thing with different languages. Prolonged drought weakens giant trees. Torrential rains wash away fragile soils. And between these two extremes, life tries to improvise. The spider monkey, which depends on the continuous canopy, is one of the first to feel these changes. When young trees fail to replace the old ones, its aerial highway is interrupted. A jump that was once routine becomes risky. The geography of fear is expanding. The blue and yellow macaw, a seed messenger, finds fewer fruits in certain corridors. It must fly farther, expend more energy, and compete with other species that have also lost their refuges. The sky is filled with longer trajectories. Even the sea, so far from the Andes, plays a part in this story. The El Niño phenomenon, a familiar one on the Peruvian coast, is behaving with greater intensity. When the waters warm up, the fish change their routes and the fishermen are left adrift. The coast, the mountains, and the jungle are linked by invisible threads. Faced with this scenario, strategies emerged that blend science and memory. In several high Andean regions, immunos, ancient pre-Hispanic systems that infiltrate rainwater to recharge springs are being restored. Ancient technology for an uncertain future. The communities that revived these practices discovered that the past was not backwardness, but a valuable resource. The stone canals, designed centuries ago, function as water reservoirs that mitigate droughts. Knowledge is also an ecosystem. In the Amazon, reforestation projects prioritize native species that feed wildlife. It's not just about planting trees, but about rebuilding relationships. Fruit for monkeys, nesting sites for macaws, shade for rivers. A forest is not a sum of tree trunks, it is a network of biological wills. The jaguar has become an indicator of success. Where it reappears, it signifies that the ecosystem is regaining complexity. Its presence demands prey, corridors, and tranquility. Protecting it means protecting everything. A single feline can measure the size of a country. But the climate also brings conflicts. When water is scarce, crops compete with wetlands. When rains destroy roads, people seek new sources of income and pressure on wildlife increases. Social equilibrium is as fragile as ecological equilibrium. The crisis is not just natural, it is human. Some Andean cities have begun to see the mountains as allies once again. Incentives are being paid to conserve grasslands that capture moisture, and native forests that regulate streams are being protected. The economy learns to look up. In the inter-Andean valleys, the puma observes these transformations from its age-old silence. Agricultural fences limit its territory, but initiatives to reduce dangerous encounters are also growing. Guard dogs, reinforced corrals, fair compensation. Living together ceases to be a slogan and becomes a daily practice. The condor, which relies on carrion, indirectly senses the pulse of the climate. Less livestock due to drought means less food. Its majestic flight also serves as a barometer of the rural economy. Nothing flies in isolation. In the lowland rainforest, the capybara takes refuge in shrinking swamps. Caimans concentrate their hunting in increasingly smaller bodies of water. Tension between species grows like the temperature. The heat has moral consequences. Even so, Peru demonstrates a unique capacity for adaptation. Amazonian communities diversify their farms with resilient crops. Andean farmers cultivate heirloom potato varieties that tolerate unpredictable frosts. Diversity is a life insurance policy. The researchers, for their part, are installing weather stations in places where previously there were only myths. But they are also learning to listen to those who have been reading the sky since childhood. Science stops dictating and starts conversing. Spider monkeys reappear in restored forests. Macaws find new palm trees planted by human hands, small victories that don't make headlines but sustain hope. The recovery is slow, but he has a pulse. However, the challenge is growing faster than the victories. Glacial melt threatens entire cities that depend on that water for drinking and agriculture. The Amazon rainforest, if it becomes too degraded, could stop producing its own rain. Peru could lose its cloud factory. That's why the discussion is no longer just environmental, it's strategic. How do we feed millions without destroying the soil? How do we generate energy without drying up rivers? How do we grow without impoverishing future generations? Questions that weigh like mountains. The solutions are beginning to take shape in specific territories. In Cusco, biological corridors connect protected areas. In Madre de Dios, communities monitor illegal mining with technology and courage. On the northern coast, restored mangroves mitigate storms. The country is rehearsing a new script. The puma, the condor, the vicuña, the jaguar, the macaw, and the spider monkey thus become political figures without their knowledge. Their fate encapsulates human decisions. Each species is a vote of the landscape. The climate will continue to change, with or without permission. The question is whether Peru will change intelligently or out of fear, whether it will listen to its rivers as one listens to an elder, or treat them like mere pipes. The future is shaped like a basin. This Part 5 is not an ending, it's a bridge. We've seen how climate rewrites pathways, how wildlife responds, how communities invent solutions, but we still need to look at the bigger picture, the large protected areas, the international efforts, the success stories, and the threats that remain. Peru does not end at its borders, nor does it begin there. What happens in a high-altitude lake can be felt weeks later in a Pacific port. A tree felled in the Amazon can alter a cloud that will nourish a coastal valley. This country functions like an organism where each organ depends on the others. Understanding that has been the great lesson of the century. For decades, the idea of progress was separate from the idea of nature. Mountains were seen as obstacles, jungles as storehouses, and the sea as an endless larder. But reality has been correcting that narrative with increasingly clear signs: exhausted rivers, sick glaciers, wounded forests. The territory began to speak a language that could no longer be ignored. From that forced dialogue, the great protected areas were born, national parks that function as repositories of biological memory, reserves where the jaguar can still move about without crossing a road, where the spider monkey maintains bridges of branches and the macaw finds ancient trees to nest in. They are not landscape museums, they are factories of the future. Manu National Park, for example, beats like a green heart that sends life to entire regions. There, science discovered that a single tree can support dozens of species, and that a seemingly modest stream regulates the climate for hundreds of kilometers. The true size of the jungle is not measured in hectares, it is measured in relationships. In the highlands, vicuña reserves have shown that conservation can go hand in hand with economic well-being. Communities that once viewed the animal as competition now see it as a shared heritage. Fiber became a bridge, respect became income. The condor, freed from invisible cages, is slowly returning to the skies where it had disappeared. Each reintroduced individual is a message. Species are not closed chapters. They can be reopened stories. The flight is also being reconstructed. However, no protected area is a perfect island. Boundaries on maps don't stop fire or mercury, nor do they convince people to stop poverty or the illegal market. That's why a more ambitious concept emerged: corridors of life, paths for animals and also for ideas, connecting forests, uniting ravines, linking mangroves with coastal deserts. allowing the puma to cross from one valley to another without becoming tragic news, the spider monkey to travel without touching the ground, seeds to follow their ancient path. The country began to think of itself as a network. In this framework, indigenous peoples occupy a central place. They protect nearly half of the Peruvian Amazon without needing grand pronouncements. Their territories act as living barriers against deforestation. They are not guardians out of romanticism. They are guardians for survival. The young people in these communities combine GPS with mythology, drones with stories from their elders. They learn to report illegal mining using solar-powered phones and to map farms with modern applications. Tradition became patient technology. Cities are also beginning to awaken. Lima, Cusco, Arequipa, and Trujillo are discovering that their water originates far away in places where an Andean bear, another silent inhabitant, disperses seeds that protect springs. The urban citizen finally enters the narrative. Peruvian and foreign universities are building bridges of research. They are studying macaw calls to understand forest health, jaguar tracks to measure connectivity, and spider monkey nests as a barometer of restoration. Science learns to listen patiently, but the future isn't built on data alone. It needs collective emotion. That's why documentaries, rural schools, and water and forest festivals become as important as a decree. Conservation is also a cultural act. Peru now faces a historic decision: to become a cheap supplier of raw materials or a smart biodiversity powerhouse. Both paths produce money. Only one produces tomorrow. The jaguar is unaware of it, but its fate depends on that choice. If the corridors close, its territory will become an archipelago of solitude. If they open, it will remain the invisible king of the Amazonian night. Every human decision leaves a feline footprint. The spider monkey, acrobat of the canopy, needs trees that have not yet been born. Its future is decided in modest nurseries, in the hands of those who plant native species without expecting applause. Plant patience sustains animal agility. The blue and yellow macaw will continue to paint the sky as long as there are ancient palm trees and clean riverbanks. Its metallic cry is more than just beautiful. It's a harbinger of a healthy forest. A bird can be diagnostic. The capybara will continue to remind us that calm is also a strategy, that wetlands are not useless land but sponges of life that protect cities from floods. Slowness also saves. And the condor, from heights where human noise fades away, will watch to see if we have learned our lesson. Its shadow is a question that travels across mountain ranges. Will we be worthy of this heaven? Climate change will continue to present challenges. There will be years of drought and years of fury, but a country that protects its biodiversity has more tools at its disposal than one that disregards it. Biodiversity is a collective insurance. Let's imagine a Peru where every watershed has guardians, where children know the names of trees as well as they know the names of soccer teams, where seeing a jaguar is a source of national pride and not fear. That country is not a fantasy. It is already being born in fragments. High-altitude schools teach water routes. In the rainforest, cacao fairs are held without deforestation. On the coast, mangroves are being restored to bring back birds. Small revolutions without headlines. The future of wild Peru does not depend on a lone hero, but on millions of everyday decisions, buying responsibly, traveling respectfully, demanding policies with a long memory. Conservation is a daily democracy. Our journey began among peaks that touch the sky and ends with our feet firmly on the ground. We have seen the puma move like a shadow of the rock, the condor write sacred circles, the vicuña reborn from near extinction. We have felt the pulse of the spider monkey, the calm of the capybara, the silent roar of the jaguar. All those lives tell the same story, that of Peru as a crossroads of worlds. The Andes, the Amazon, and the Pacific are not three separate settings. They are chapters of a single book, and that book is not yet finished being written. When the sun sets over the snow-capped mountains and the last macaw returns to its roost, the entire country seems to inhale. The rivers continue their journey to the sea, the stars light up over the jungle, and the condor chooses a cliff to spend the night. Tomorrow everything will start again. Let this journey not be a farewell, but an invitation to see with new eyes the land that sustains our lives, to understand that protecting wild Peru is protecting our own possibility of a future. If these images and words awakened in you the desire to care for what exists, share this journey, support those who defend nature, and demand that development remembers. The planet doesn't need spectators, it needs partners in life. Because as long as a puma keeps crossing a ravine, as long as a spider monkey finds a bridge of branches, as long as the jaguar drinks from a clean river and the condor draws circles over the Andes, there will be hope. Peru is not just a country. It is an ancient promise that still breathes, and its story, like this forest, continues.